Hello, 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 and welcome back to Who's Views Reviews. And we are today going to be investigating what Davros, Halley's Comet, and a Saturday morning telly presenter for kids' TV have in common. Yes, indeed, it's time to go back to 1985. And as you can see, I'm joined again by the Whotastic Panel. Hello, Whotastic Panel.
Hello.
Evening.
Hello, everyone. Hello.
Great to see you guys. Right, the first thing I want to do, I want to ask you, before we get into talking about the episode, am I the only Doctor Who fan that can recall every single moment of Saturday, January the 5th, 1985?
Why were you breaking the law?
I hope not. No, not at all. Can you guys remember Saturday, January the 5th, though? Because for me, it's ingrained on my memory. No, obviously not.
Quite near to New Year. I remember still being partying after New Year, so it's all kind of 1985 just started. So it was quite a new year for me, quite fun.
Well, I'll explain to you yourself, panel, and also to the Who viewers why it's ingrained in my memory. I was just so excited because, of course, Saturday, 5th of January was the day that season 22 of our beloved show started with this very story that we're going to be talking about today. And I was so excited. We were coming off the back of not having seen Colin, our brand new Doctor, as he still was then, for a few months after the Twin Dilemma the previous year. And I remember getting up on Saturday morning and I started my day with Saturday Superstore because I couldn't believe this. On Saturday Superstore that day, as you can see on the left-hand side there, broadcast live at 9 o'clock in the morning on Saturday, the 5th of January, you had Colin Baker, you had Nicola Bryant, Mary Tam, and Jacqueline Pierce being interviewed there by Sarah Green. At that point, they were talking about this pantomime they were doing with John Nathan Turner down in Southampton. And then they returned later on in the show, and there you can see Colin, you can see Nicola, and you can see Jackie Pierce there. They were taking live calls from fans who were phoning in. And that started me off. They also showed clips from stories that were coming that night. And that got me so excited. I was just like, oh my God, Doctor Who's back. It felt like it was really back that day. So yes, the answer is yes. I am the only one that remembers Saturday, the 5th of January in every single detail.
There may be a question of age here, JT, being slightly older than you. In 1985, on a Saturday morning, I was probably getting over the Friday night. So that's my excuse.
All right, then. Okay, well, we'll let you have that one. That's the thing. But it was brilliant. I also remember on that day, my mother taking down the Christmas decorations, myself going to town, and I managed to, I went to town deliberately because I wanted to get a copy of the Radio Times. Because the Radio Times, of course, was showing what was on the left there, new series, Doctor Who starting. It had that lovely picture of Colin with the Cybermen there. And for me, this was the start of being able to say, Attack of the Cybermen is here. So Attack of the Cybermen, it hit at 5:20 on BBC One that night. Were you all there watching it? What was the initial reaction?
Well, I remember the trailers beforehand. There were some great trailers for the new season. And I love Attack of the Cybermen. I have to say, I'm a big 80s Cyberman fan, and this is the third time they're back, and they're more than welcome. A great start for the new season for Colin, definitely.
Mm-hmm. Brendan?
Well, I mean, we were trying to work our ages, whether we remember the day. I was 16. I had my first job. On that night, I'd be a glass collector at a big hotel and country club. So I remember the early evening. I remember Saturday Superstar. But I was at peak Doctor Who fan period now. I was saying to you the other day, I was trying to find my diary because I wrote a diary at this time of my job, what was going on with my A-levels, and also what was happening with Doctor Who. And I was writing a Doctor Who script, and it was all modelled on Colin Baker's Doctor. I loved his literary quotes. I loved his domineering persona. When you were all talking about Colin the other day, and I was and being a bit miffed about Twin Dilemma, I loved Twin Dilemma. I thought it sold him so well, and I think you were saying that. honestly, I was so salivating for Colin Baker to start in Attack of the Cybermen. So I was at peak Doctor Who geekdom. I was dying to hear about Telos and all the other things going on. This was like, and there was talk that it was going to be like, they'd seen the successful formula of Resurrection of the Daleks. So they kind of had a similar formula, I find, director, etc., to then replicate it with the Cybermen.
Mm-hmm. I mean, we have to say as well, I mean, John, I don't know where you're coming from on this, but as I say, part of my excitement about getting to 5:20 that Saturday night, watching Superstore, watching my mum take down the Christmas decorations, going up to town, you know, getting through the end of Grandstand, which just never seemed to stop, did it, Grandstand? It was on all blooming afternoon. It seemed like, oh, come on! And then, of course, to be greeted by a Doctor that hits the ground running. I mean, Colin, from the moment we see him, he's just there, isn't he? He's present. He's in the mode. There's no faffing around. Here we go. This is your Doctor. Yeah,
I think the first shock was the time that it was going to go on at 5:20. It's the earliest Doctor that had been since the latter Tom Baker season 18. So that the Doctor had been, if you like, the gateway to the rest of BBC One Saturday evening was what was new. The fact that it was back on a Saturday was also Back to the Future. You know, we'd now Doctor Who Saturday slot. So it was a big thing. And also, it was the first of the 45-minute episodes. So there was a whole lot of newness going on. And after, although I have to disagree with the Time Muddler, and not for the first time, that while he didn't like, he liked the Twin Dilemma, I thought poor Colin, while being brilliant, had got off to a false start. And I was looking, particularly that the Cybermen were going to be involved, to a real rollicking opening, not only to the season, but really to 6's tenure as such. So, new 45-minute episodes, gateway to the BBC Saturday evening, bit of a prestigious slot, if you like, but also Doctor Who back where it belonged on Saturday evenings. What was not to be excited about?
Yeah, and it's a fair point, isn't it? Because when we all heard that Doctor Who was going back to Saturdays, and bearing in mind as well, Who viewers, that it had been off Saturdays for the Peter Davison tenure, and that whole era was twice weekly, whatever day the BBC decided to put it on. Through the 3 years there. So here it was on a firm solid 20 past 5 on a Saturday night. And it did sort of make that, it did remind you about the Who-ish quality of Saturdays on the BBC. Whether or not they actually really made the most of it, that's another story. But here it was back. But I don't know, for me, Attack of the Cybermen really, and having rewatched it again, it's packed, isn't it, guys? It's packed full of, isn't it?
Oh, there's lots of action in it. Lots of the pace of the first episode, particularly, is really fast. I've often thought of it. It's like Doctor Who does Minder, the first part. It's really feels like the Minder, the Sweeney, the real, especially the location work in London's great, you know. And Matthew Robinson, I wish he'd done more than 2 stories, because he's great as an action director. He's up there with Graham Harper and Peter Grimwade. He's a great director, and some great scenes, great moments in the episodes, particularly part 1.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, what strikes me about this, having watched it again, and I don't often say this, but I think season 22 is actually a very solid season, and I think Colin just goes for it. But one of the things that got me very, very quickly was his relationship with Nicola Bryant and Perry, the Doctor and Perry. It was slightly different to what it evolved to later on in the season. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, definitely starts off a bit warmer with each other, I think, definitely, don't you think?
I definitely think there was a legacy from Twin Dilemma, which where they were trying to establish the relationship on a more safer footing, because obviously it was more risque with Twin Dilemma. Can I say, obviously I love Nicola Bryant and I like Perry and the way she became, but my jury's out if I was judging just this story. I found there was some mishits with their dialogue, etc. Like, you know, at the end, and he's really disappointed with how he misjudged Lytton. And he said, why didn't he tell me? Why didn't he tell me? And Perry says, because you didn't ask him. And there's a bit of, I don't know, there's some mishits to me. And they established a kind of Tegan-esque tension, which is, you know, she's going to whine about this. And poor Nicola Bryant was given those lines. So I'm not judging that. It's just that, and then, you know, he'd pick on Americanisms. And I thought, oh, no. It was much better, I thought, for the second season with them together.
Oh, definitely.
But, you know, jury's out a little bit for this
Yeah.
one.
I think what I'm trying to say is that for Attack of the Cybermen, though, this starts quite strong, but it gets too much because these little elements that are in Attack of the Cybermen are then built on and continued for the rest of the season with each story here, and it can get a lot. But I do think there is something between the two of them here, you know. But I tell you something else about this story. When I say it's packed, when you watch it again now, I love the way that everything is connected and everything is a plot device, and it just moves the story on in an old-fashioned way. Have you guys picked up on that?
Yeah. Can I mention something just based on what both of you said prior to that? First of all, we have to remember this was the first episode which was in the 45-minute format. You know, so in terms of scripting and script editing, this was all new to the team as well. So there will be certain misfires in it, and I think it did set the trend for there being too many and overlong TARDIS scenes in the beginning. So it takes a little while for the Doctor and Perry to get into the action. So the episode isn't properly paced as such. So what Sabre's chosen to do is fill it with perhaps a little bit of, rather than have the Doctor doing yes Doctor, no Doctor by Perry and so on, they build in that friction. Now, during the Colin Baker celebration we had last week, I said I quite liked that. I thought it was quite brave of the production team, to try something new. It is. But I think probably it was as a direct result of finding their feet with this format that they had to find a way into them. In most Tom Baker Peter Davros stories, wham bam, the Doctor lands and out of the TARDIS he comes and away he goes. Very much in season 22, it takes the Doctor, in fact, in Revelation of the Daleks, it takes him a whole first episode to arrive at the scene of the adventure, if you like. However, nonetheless, I think they're very much finding their feet, and that explains a lot of the misfires with this. But you're quite right, JT, in terms of Eric Saber had written, I think, in interviews afterwards, how he was very much in terms of an 80s style of scripting, where you feed the viewers, you drip feed them certain things, and they don't realise the relevance of something until something happens maybe 15 or 20 minutes later. So you reward them for paying proper attention to something. It's not just like over on the other side with A-Team, the biggest explosion you can get. You're actually encouraging viewers to say, right, okay, this is happening. Why is that happening? Why is Litton here with them now? We're not going to let you know now. Why is he mixing with this gang of criminals? And we don't get to learn, for example, that Russell is indeed a policeman. He makes a phone call, but there's no reference that he's calling into headquarters. We don't go into that to much, much later on. So it rewards loyalty and attention from the viewers, which the opposition, which ultimately won out, unfortunately, over on ITV, didn't. It just gave people a lot of eye candy.
Yeah, I mean, that's what gets... who's talking there? Sorry, go ahead.
No, it was me. I said they gave it chewing gum for the eyes on the other side.
Well,
Oh, sorry. I thought what you said about the plotting really did work. I thought that there was a lot of plot, I must admit. But, if they mentioned Telos, the first time they mentioned Telos, then you jump to Telos. The first time they mentioned Cyber Control or the Cyber Controller, you jump to it. And it visually worked as well. Never mind just kind of mention, then you jump set in. So it kind of unraveled, or layers were revealed as we went through.
Yeah.
The location work for Telos is fabulous. I mean, Doctor gets slagged off for being a bit of a cliche, being a quarry all the time. But Matthew Robinson's really got the atmosphere of Telos. It feels like a different planet. And all the kind of reject Cybermen spoilers coming up are all there. And it's a great concept. And Stratton and Bates, especially Bates, he's really scary. What a scary character. Michael Atwood, fantastic performance.
It was great that they actually returned to Gerrard's Cross, the original quarry location for Tomb of the Cybermen. So I thought that was very, very good of them.
Well, that was very much of that era, wasn't it? I mean, there was a lot of continuity. And again, in this story as well, it's packed full of continuity when it comes to this. I mean, Paul, you're just mentioning there about bringing Telos back. So this is, in a sense, a direct sequel to Tomb of the Cybermen. There are references to Telos that come into this and the Tomb of the Cybermen. But there's also things as well that bring it in. I mean, the reveal, actually, I mean, 1985, for people that don't know it, 1985 was a special year because, of course, Halley's Comet was actually going to be seen from Earth at that point. Now, Halley's Comet, just in case you don't know, 1986 it was due, and it's next due in 2061 because it's a comet that takes a 76-year journey around the sun. So to have it featured in Doctor Who was, I thought, very, very sweet. It was very nice. So there's the BBC Doctor Who version on the left, of course, on the TARDIS scanner. That's a NASA version on the right-hand side. That's the official version of what it should look like. But what gets me is it's brought into the story. Because, of course, in 1986, in Doctor Who continuity, that's when Mondas was destroyed. I mean, this was a gift. This period of time to the production team was a gift. And how clever of people like Eric Saber to suddenly realize, actually, there's a story set next year. And wouldn't it make sense if the Cybermen could time travel and stop it from happening? And there's a basis of a story. And we can actually bleed in Halley's Comet into this as a way to try and change history.
I mean, yeah. You had so many. I mean, you had so many Easter eggs: the Totter's Lane, the Halley's Comet. Telos, you know, as a like I said, as a 16-year-old, I was excited. I'd read the books and I was really into it. Wow, how is this going to? I'd never seen the cyber controller before. I was dying to see all these layers. And yes, it was. I'm mad on my astronomy, so I was really looking forward to how Halley's Comet was going to be used.
It's
now,
interesting.
You know, when
about continuity. So carry on.
But
Ben,
when
sorry.
I know, I did. It did. Yeah, I know there's discussion about that. When you see there were 2 episodes, 8.9 million for the first, and was it 7.2 for the second? And you think, did our enjoyment as Doctor Who fans and all these layers of continuity and detail, did it lose some of the viewers? So that's the snag.
I don't know. I personally would argue against that. I don't know about you, Paul, but I would say any first episode of a new Doctor, and let's face it, this was the second bite of the cherry for Colin's Doctor, because you know they may not have seen the time because that was Twin Dilemma Road, because that was on in the evening. I think it was on either before or after Top of the Pops. Some of the youngsters would have been going out. I don't know, but here it is on a Saturday night, 5:20. I don't think it did, because the ratings for that season, no matter what anybody says, were actually very comparable to Peter Davison's. They were very strong. They didn't go below really the 7 mark. So I don't think it did. But I think people would have just enjoyed the fact there's a lot of action in it, Time Muddler. Wouldn't you say, Paul? Oh,
yeah, definitely. I mean, I think that going back to continuities for a minute, the continuity as a fan, I loved it, as Brendan's saying. I mean, it's great, all the callbacks to Tomb and all that kind of stuff. But what made me laugh, actually, in part 2, when they go to the tombs, it's like Telos have had a visit from changing rooms just to get the tombs changed to make it look different, you know?
Well, you're not far wrong, are you? I mean, they are very 80s style.
Yeah.
It is a continuity. Can I stick my 2 penneth worth in? I think that it is a bit of a continuity fest. And I when watching it again, it's been a little while since I saw it. I tried to look at it with unjaundiced eyes, I'd say, about the continuity, to see, could I enjoy this without knowing what I do about Mondas and Telos and the tombs and what have you? And I think you could. I absolutely think you could. Whether or not it's a good idea to include all that sort of continuity is a different matter. But for example, in terms of overuse of continuity, the whole I am Foreman thing. Why? Well, why did they bother doing that? Because not only does it look nothing like it, like the original thing, I was, as a fan at the time, I'd been a fan all my life. That was one of the things I was quite looking forward to. Maybe at some point in Doctor Who's celebration, because the 20th anniversary didn't happen with the five Doctors, but it may well be something we do in the future. Go back to the scene of that very first adventure. Now, eventually they do with Remembrance of the Daleks, and they do it properly, and they really up. However, I just found this to be one step too far with continuity, because it just didn't achieve anything. It didn't do anything. And that mixed up with the whole let's play around with the chameleon circuit. Just thought, you know what? Let's get the Doctor and Perry into this story. I don't know why we're faffing about with all this other stuff. And it was one over the top for me.
The chameleon circuit story is interesting because I, as a fan at the time, I'm sure you all felt the same, that when the idea of the TARDIS being changed into something else was a horrific idea, and we thought, oh no, you know. And I think I like probably all of you guys as well was a bit aghast at this, but then didn't realize till later that it was J&T just working his magic, trying to get good publicity for the show and get some paper interest in that, you know, press interest.
And it worked, because if you remember, when Colin was cast, there was and did this years later. He did it deliberately, simply because he did
Oh, JT, you've left us. You're frozen.
Well, we'll keep talking. Oh, there he is.
You're back.
Oh, did I disappear? Sorry about that. Let's wait until the weather disappeared. But anyway, we are live. Hello to everybody who's watching us live. But one of the he got rid of the police box deliberately to try and get himself into column itches. Yeah. And then what he did then is he changed the police box to tease his audience and to tease the fans, and he did that deliberately. And he was a little tinker, wasn't he, JNT? He was a little tinker. He really was.
Just back to that, I absolutely think that was the right thing. He was very good at getting publicity, all the rest of it, and he could have done all that shtick with bringing the TARDIS without actually having to have it in a story at all, because it contributed nothing to it. And I just thought it was a piece of nonsense, and it just took me out of the story while that was happening. And very quickly, it's all forgotten about anyway, because if you're going to do something like that, make it integral to the story, make it, with parallel to what is going on. But it just seemed to have been squeezed in for no apparent reason.
And because, it is a fascinating story to discuss at all these. Chameleon Circuit could be an episode on its own. We could discuss continuity. There's so much going on, and still the establishment of a new actor in the role properly. I just thought it was just trying to, for example, I was fascinated by the tone in this one. There's a lot of humor and comedy in parts to establish relationships. Not sure about some of the music, the TV theme references. I thought the BBC were trying to get rid of some of their latest greatest hits tapes because we had Steptoe and everything. Steptoe was good. I understand that. Another Easter egg, another thing. But I just thought, you mentioned, Paul, it was gritty. It was Minder. I loved that as a 16-year-old. I thought, oh, God, this is serious Doctor Who. So it had a grit to it. I thought the outside broadcast stuff was great. And so I felt some of the comedic things were undercutting itself. And I think Matthew Robinson was trying to make it gritty. Obviously, he'll have had a say in the music as well. But I thought, we're undercutting. Those two police officers were quite intimidating and menacing. We knew them from Resurrection, and you were wanting a lot more of that kind of sinister quality. And then they were playing daft music over it. And I thought, it's a shame they're undercutting the lovely realism they've established with a bit of that comedy stuff,
The policemen get a bit wasted in this, don't they? They're not in it for very long, which is a shame.
No, they're not. And it's one of those things, isn't it, really? Now we've introduced the Cybermen into it. I think the policemen into it. We do need to talk about, obviously, another returning character here. Now, Lytton, of course, again, a holdover from the previous year's story, Resurrection of the Daleks. He makes an appearance here. I personally think Lytton was wasted. Now, because today, Lytton would be made as a semi-regular character who would turn up every now and then, wouldn't he? He'd probably even have his own spin-off series in this blooming world that we're in now. I know he's got his own sort of spin-off comic series, which deals with life before he meets the Daleks. You can get these from Cutaway Comics. This is set in 1970s Soho, believe it or not, where Lytton is up to his tricks there. But what you've got here is a really good character, played by a really good actor, Maurice Colburn. Yeah. I don't know. There's just something that I think he was a threat in Resurrection. I didn't like him instantly in Resurrection of the Daleks, and here he is again. And I don't like him much now. But something happens by episode 2, and he gets softer. And even though I don't like him, I just think he could have come back every now and then. And imagine what would have happened. It could have been. Oh, I don't know.
I totally agree with you there. I just wonder if there was a dose of the Sabalom glitzes about this, in that there was another character. They thought, we could maybe use Lytton for this. And you talk about he softens because he has to soften in order for the twist at the end. He's actually working for the Cryons. That'll be for me. Just tell them I'm not in.
I can't believe that. Why do people always call me when I am live on YouTube?
Often before he gets, so we get to the end, so we understand he's not with he's back working for the Cryons. But that whole character arc, that whole story arc with the way Lytton goes, I don't buy into that, and I don't buy the Doctor suddenly feeling as though he's misjudged a man who's not only got blood in his hands from Resurrection, but he's got blood in his hands from what's happened during Attack of the Cybermen. He may well be working for the Cryons, but he is killing people early.
Absolutely, he's a murderer. Yeah.
So I think for the Doctor to get this notion about I've never misjudged him so badly. No, you didn't misjudge him. You misread him during this particular story and his motives. but he's still a mercenary. He was still a gun for hire in this, no matter who it was he was serving. It just so happened this time wasn't the Daleks, it was the Cryons.
That's right,
And that was the dramatic change. Again, wasn't it? Adding to your point there, he says at one point in the dialogue, I despise Lytton. I despise him. Mm-hmm. Which I thought, I made a note because I thought that's quite dramatic for a doctor to say. I mean, he despised Lytton. And I think early on in part 2, he said he must be a spy. His judgments every time where he's up to no good. He's the wrong sort. And then right at the end, from a shout from Perry as they're getting into the TARDIS almost, saying he was working for the Cryons, and then a Cryon kind of nods, so to speak. And then suddenly he goes, well, we'll go to cyber control then. Wow. I mean, that was a hell of a shift. But I did like the twist because it gave the narrative another quality. And it did give Colin Baker that chance to show a softness and a self-critical element as well. Because we're trying to build Colin's Doctor, aren't we? And after the Twin Dilemma end, when I am the Doctor, whether you like it or not. In this version, he had doubt. It was very Silurians. It was very Warriors of the Deep with Peter Davison at the end, when he was disappointed with himself and the human race.
Yeah, it's interesting what you're saying there. When it comes to it, though, for Colin's Doctor, I would have had him more, because I remember being 15 watching that when it went out live, and I'm thinking, hang on a minute, that doesn't, what's he talking about there? I mean, this is Lytton. He was a nasty piece of work. And I would have thought Colin's Doctor would have went, meh, and stepped over him. I mean, Jamie's saying that all mercenaries, TARDIS Spider's saying that all mercenaries have a dark side that is really always there. Hello to TARDIS Spider. It's lovely to see you. I want to say also hello to Jamie and to Sam for joining us as well. I hope you're enjoying the conversation, guys, and please do keep sending us the messages on this.
A mercenary is a gun for hire. Somebody, and no doubt Lytton was working for, he offers diamonds to Griffiths later on, So he did, diamonds or something. So it just appeared tacked on. This whole sort of, I have never misjudged enemy as much as I misjudged Lytton. It's just, it's not true. The Doctor, so you want to say Doctor? No, actually, you didn't misjudge him. You might have got the who he was supporting and why he was supporting him incorrect. But you didn't misjudge him. He was still very much a gun for hire. And his hands are steeped in blood at the end of this adventure, just as much as they were at the end of Resurrection. Remember?
Oh, smooth.
The last time we saw him in Resurrection, the last thing he did was kill 2 of his compatriots. You're going, I'm going, and so are you.
Exactly.
So that's Lytton, and that should have remained Lytton. And the Doctor, while understanding his reasons for siding with the Cryons and maybe supporting the Doctor would do it for a very different reason. He'd do it because it was right, not because it was for money. And Lytton was very much doing it for what he could get out of it.
Yeah. I was going to say, guys, the interesting the way it did end with the Doctor doing his Rambo impression that Colin mentions quite a lot at conventions and stuff. But I'm surprised actually based on that he didn't turn around and shoot Lytton on the way out.
Well,
the interesting thing with Colin and Lytton character is earlier on in the episode, I know it was bluff, but he said to Perry, shoot Russell. So 1 minute he apparently has no compassion at all, and the next minute he has a lot of compassion for Lytton.
Yeah, I mean, you could argue it is bringing out the Doctor's alien side. For me, it doesn't quite. I mean, it could be, but for me, it doesn't quite fit because you're going from one parameter to another. You mentioned Russell there. Let's talk about Lytton's gang because we've got some cracking features here as well. And as I said at the top of the show, what brings Davros into this? Well, as we all know, of course, Terry Malloy, who's in the middle there, for the first time and the last time in his roles as Doctor Who, got the Davros mask taken off him, and he was able to play another part, and very well he did too. And of course, what he was playing there, he was playing the aforementioned Russell. We've got a British TV icon in a sense, really, because he seemed to be on everything. You mentioned Minder and all this sort of stuff, but Brian Glover, ex-wrestler, Brian Glover was playing Russell. Payne was played by James Beckett. And then, of course, you've got the fantastic Michael Atwell, who again was a name. He was a face you knew on various shows, Dempsey and Makepeace a lot. And you've got Jonathan David playing Stratton. Now, guys, these guys were really this was a proper sort of East End heavy mob.
Yeah, I actually remember Michael Atwell. The last time I saw him before Attack of the Cybermen, he was playing a big butch burglar robbing Grace Brothers, and menacing Mr. Humphreys and Mrs. Slocum.
How dare he?
Notice him. How very dare he indeed. But yeah, you're absolutely spot on there. And wasn't it wonderful to see finally Brian Glover in Doctor Who, one of my most favourite actors of the time, and he's just wonderful in that part. Wonderful.
To be honest, I think if we were going to do a nice little judgment of everything, I think he stole the show. I thought Brian Glover was outstanding. There was and he was given some great lines. I just thought Brian Glover was great. I loved his impersonation, Dalek-like. It's all getting a bit wrong. I loved, because the dialogue for Lytton, he said he's from Riften 5 in a social cluster, and there was a lot of sci-fi, and then he said, I thought you said you were from Fulham. And I loved those lines. I thought, he's just getting all the lines. It's fantastic.
He's also got the other great line when the TARDIS is an organ.
Yes.
When he says time travel in an organ, which is another great line. Fantastic.
And he thought the Cybermen was a fancy dress party. And I think this is one of the issues, because that cast, I mean, we lost one of them early on, and Russell in the TARDIS, but the Stratton and Bates, Griffiths and Lytton, what a combination of anger, aggression, masculinity. You had a hell of a combination there. And the way the plot and the narrative led us, and I think this is one flaw I have to say in the whole program, was that I think you could see the grit in Stratton and Bates, and you could understand what they were trying to do. You follow them through, and they ended up both dead. You follow Griffiths, and you kind of like his humour, and you like his confusion about what's going on. But my following him, for what reason? I follow Lytton to a degree, because you do almost feel sympathy for him, the way it goes from part 1 to part 2. But no, and of course, this was one of the things about this program, wasn't it? That the amount of deaths, or how it was shown. I was following characters, I was liking them, and none of them were going to manage it, And I think this was it. Such a strong cast. They sold their lines so well. I was scared stiff of, is it Bates? I was getting mixed up. Bates, Stratton. Michael Atwell. Wow, he was so angry, so determined. Yeah. And that added all the grit that we got from the London part 1. I just absolutely loved it. As a 16-year-old, I thought, this is what Doctor Who is. Don't tell me it's a rubbish program. This is brilliant.
I love that. That's great. But it does come out there, because you've got those wonderful, and you mentioned it, you touched on it there. This is one of the few Doctor Who's where good doesn't necessarily win, if you know what I mean. I mean, the Cybermen don't win outright, but they do have an impact. And the impact is chop, 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 one way or another. And it just brings that whole element home, because in effect, if this was sort of, these guys were criminals, weren't they? They wouldn't have been nice. They would have been quite rough. They didn't trust each other. That sort of comes out, but you have to be careful, because you are looking at a family audience as well. But if it was going to be on after 9 o'clock, that lot, you wouldn't mind being electrocuted and being cybernized and all this sort of stuff. It was, but they were great portrayals. What a group of actors to get together to put on all this amazing stuff.
That's the thing, though, isn't it? Apparently, I think they changed the time slot for the show. It's going to be later on on Saturday night, and not 5:20. It should have been on after the Watershed, to be honest.
When they were writing it, they thought it was going to be later. Yes.
So I remember hearing all that years ago. Yeah. So it's interesting to hear that is actually true. Jamie's saying here it was quite a violent episode with the death count, and it was, wasn't it? This was Doctor Who being a little bit more mature, moving slightly with the times. I never understood all this stuff that started with Attack of the Cybermen, with this episode, really. So it's getting a bit gritty, it's getting a bit violent now. When you had something like the A-Team that you mentioned there, on the other side. I never.
I think it's because I see what you're saying.
This makes the A-Team look like Teletubbies, to be fair,
wasn't it? And whereas Doctor Who was being played quite seriously here, and I think we'll mention, I'm sure, the director later, and how Matthew Robinson did some of the stuff, because of some fascinating director's work. And I think where the violence emphasis comes from, we all talk about the bloodied hands at the end, but he was on that shot for quite a while. It's a kind of Deadly Assassin drowning moment, where you saw his pain, you heard his pain, you saw him suffering, then it cuts away and you come back and you see. And then you see him on the floor. And if you think about it, I think it's just the amount of time spent on it, which was dramatic and gritty, and I loved as a 16-year-old. but you can see where some people start to ask questions, you know.
I could see where certain aspects of adults, like happens today, can come into it. But as a 15-year-old, as I was loving the adventure, and I was loving the fact that actually I'm beginning to realize as a 15-year-old, not all the Doctor's adventures are cute and cuddly and fluffy. You know, we had that question that's just come from Sam. We're going to come back to that in a second because I want to just get on to first of all before we come to your question, Sam. The fact that for the first time, we actually saw, tying in with what we're talking about there about graphic, we started to see the cyber process. Now, this hadn't really been explored in Doctor Who at this point. It had been implied, yes, we know that the Cybermen are human, but this was the first attempt of actually showing us some sort of stages of the humans becoming fully fledged Cybermen. I was struck by this 15-year-olds. I'm considering the times. I know it could be slightly more graphic now, and it would be slightly more mature and slightly more technologically looking. But as a 15-year-old back in 1985, at around about 5:20 on an afternoon, this really had a sort of effect. I thought this was actually quite scary.
Yeah, yes, you're right. It was good to see that. But in rewatching and looking at that photograph there, I hate to be flippant. But I just wonder.
No, you don't.
Well, no, you know what you want. But I'm just wondering, why is there an Andrex dispenser dispensing pink toilet paper coming down from the ceiling into the? I could never, and I've never been able to figure out what all that's about. I mean, was it in case they had to blow their nose or wipe some other part of their nose? I don't know. What is all that about?
I don't know what that is. I mean, it's obviously, obviously they had to use the materials they've got. They're using their imagination of the time now. I mean, as I say, today it would be, I mean, if you look at this and then compare this to what came a decade later with the Borg, who did it properly in of course, our friend show, Star Trek, the wonderful Star Trek over there. They did it because the technology moved on. But when you look at that sort of aspect now, they had that round thing behind them, which you can now get in the men's workshop for about $9.99. Those little staticky things. So I'm thinking those sort of things, they played with what they can to suggest something was being pumped into them or without being, honestly, graphic or not, those images, I thought, hang on a minute, we're getting a look at how the Cybermen actually do this. And it's very interesting. And compare when the new version comes back decades later, and it's all chop, 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 and it's all robot. This isn't. This is actually taking that real Kit Pedler, Jerry Davis original idea. There's a human in there, and we've killed that human, and we've transplanted the blade. Oh, sorry, I'm going again.
It's an interesting.
Reese in the chat has answered my Andrex question.
Oh, really? Let's have a look. I think the toilet paper is a ribbon set of wires to connect the Cybermen to the computer. Well, there you go. It's using imagination.
I'll buy that.
Yeah. Well, let's go back to Sam there, guys, because Sam asked this question. Do we think the casting of the gang was down to Robinson or JNT? I feel JNT was more Faith Brown and Sarah Green and Koo Stark. You naughty, naughty, naughty Sam mentioning Koo Stark there. It seems the quality cast was perhaps more Robinson and the showbiz JNT. It was mainly JNT. Come on, let's face it. It was, wasn't it, guys?
Koo Stark was an actress, though. She appeared in some very adult movies, I dare say, but she was an actress.
But she was also the girlfriend of
an disgraced. But nonetheless, she was very much the tabloids' friend at the time. She was never out of the papers at that particular time. So JNT, just knowing his job as chief publicist for Doctor Who, as well as producing the thing, just knew how exactly to keep this thing on the front pages. And you know what? Given the fact that the Crimes are very small parts throughout it all, and obviously Koo ended up not being in it because she was going to be masked throughout, in terms of the way they ended up envisaging the Cryons. I don't think it would have made any difference. I think she would have made a good fist of it. But he absolutely was doing his job correctly. He was making sure that Doctor Who would be on people's minds and talking about the canteens and the workplaces and the schoolyards and the school classrooms. And that's exactly what should have happened. So we should learn to say, well, you know what? If Koo Stark does 10 minutes in Doctor Who, cumulatively, gets 3 million on the thing, but it doesn't really affect everything. So what?
Yeah, I mean, it will have been fronted by JNT because he knew what he was doing. Yeah, the director would have had his ensemble and certain contacts. I mean, I mean, J&T will have wanted Lytton back, I would have thought. There's certain things that would have fed into
I think that was more Eric, actually.
Really?
It was his character. Yeah.
I mean, when you were talking about the cyber process being for the first time shown, I was thinking the dialogue as well was this season does set a formula as it goes, as you were saying a lot earlier, John, about the 45 minutes getting used to. There was some chunky exposition, etc., and they're trying to work it out. But remember Stengos at the end, the glass Dalek, and how dramatically tortured he was, and yet Lytton, going through the cyber process, was tortured. And I thought it was really dramatic, that, because he was caught, wasn't he? And you realised he was still able to speak, but he was traumatised, and he was only going one way, which is to become more cyber. And I thought there were moments in season 22 where you've got the human pain. And so you Lytton and Stengos bookend the series quite dramatically, I think, with that.
Yeah. No, I tend to agree with that. I think that's a lovely summary, actually. Thanks, Time Model. I think that's it. Let's move on to more of the casting here, because we noticed that one of Matthew Robinson's casting choices was actually Kustark's replacement, and that ties me into what I was asking at the very beginning. So we've gone through Halley's Comet, and we've gone through Davros. What is next? Well, the Saturday morning television presenter. And this is always a revelation, I think, to people, of course, outside the United Kingdom, because here we have this brand new race who I have to say were originally supposed to be male, as a lot of us will know. But here we have this wonderful race, which are totally opposite to the Cybermen. The original inhabitants of Telos are the Cryons. They are first seen, and never seen again, but they are first seen here in Attack of the Cybermen. And here are the three lead actresses. And as if by magic, ta-da! This is what they looked like out of costume. And these actresses were, well, these people were well known at the time. You've got comedian and actress Faith Brown there on the left. On the right-hand side, you've got actress Sarah Berger. And in the middle, you've got the one and only Sarah Green, who was famous at the time with an entire generation for children's television. And the brilliant thing that came in with casting Sarah Green in the role was she got her own back page in the Radio Times, which was extra publicity. You know, I remember getting this. This is actually my copy. And I remember going to that and think, oh my goodness, you know, this is great. There's trouble in store for Sarah. But isn't it amazing to think that, you know, this new race here made up of those, you couldn't see them.
I know, Faith Brown is flaccid. I mean, you know, the refrigerated and all the rest of it. But you know, she had enough. She had enough on her to keep her warm. And what a shame. I mean, it was a shame that you didn't see them. I mean, on Saturday Superstore, Sarah Green was talking about her part, and where was she? You could detect a tiny bit from the voice, couldn't you? But I suppose it did its job. You knew there were famous people in it. You tuned in. The thing is, it's a shame you couldn't quite see them.
I think that's Faith Brown ultimately didn't appear because she wasn't going to be seen.
I think that was one of the reasons. Yeah, that's why her and John fell out, wasn't it? Ooh. Yeah.
You refer to Sarah Green as the one and only. It was nice having Faith Brown as we refer to her as the two and only. So, despite the mask, we knew where Faith was.
Faith Brown. The way she played flat is a lovely performance, and her and Colin work well together. But what she reminds me of is it's like an alien Margaret Thatcher a little bit.
Oh, do you think so?
A little bit.
Oh, I didn't pick up on that at all. I just got this very unfortunate leader of this brand new race of Cryons. I actually quite liked the Cryons. I think there's more
the voice JT than anything else. Yeah, more the voice.
Yeah, but that's down to the girls, the ladies who are playing it, isn't it? I mean, how wonderful! Even the movements, that delicate.
That's all good. Unfortunately, I think they make up the decision to encase them in this thing and surround them with a bubble wrap collar and some Christmas decorations. Ultimately, detracts from the performance. You really should have apply some makeup in some way, shape, or form to make them look like frosticles, perhaps, with that, so you could actually see the actor's eyes and mouth and what have you.
I mean, John, to answer that, I've gone to town on this, John. I really have. I think that, it's females with icy moustaches, living in some sort of cryon commune, fetish for long fingernails, Shakespearean ruffled collar, eyes like two monocles or like them 1970s cheap NHS glasses you got as a kid. It was too much like that. They looked as though they were refrigerated in fashion time because they all had those kind of boiler suit, cat suits on like Challenge Annika or Treasure Hunt. And they looked like a frillier, icier version of the Sensorites. Well, there was I just thought I really was willing them on because I love this idea that there were two races and that battle, and I think it was interesting to change the gender and do all that. But the Cryons, in a way, just look as though they're, especially where Flast is, imprisoned in this kind of area that looks like a dishevelled Iceland store where there's lots of tins and refrigerated areas and freezer compartments, and then her explosive is in a little kind of potting trough. And she's the Guy Fawkes of Telos, isn't she? Really, Flast.
But I went up with the ship as well. Yeah. I quite like the Cryons. I think more could have been made of them. I agree about the makeup element and that, but again, at the time, I didn't think about that because I was watching Doctor Who, and one of the things I know about Doctor Who is there were going to be some sort of alien which didn't look human. I'm being very diplomatic with that, so I was sort of expecting this in a sense, but I was just thrilled that here we got these three lovely actors and actresses who were on television an awful lot in Doctor Who as well. So even as a 15-year-old, I appreciated that. I thought that was wonderful, and it was lovely to see. In the chat, we have we've got Jamie, TARDIS Spider, and Sam talking about Mary Whitehouse. And TARDIS Spider, of course, who was out with the UK, said, was Mary Whitehouse alive at this time? Oh, yes. Mary Whitehouse was very much alive at this time. And by God, TARDIS Spider, Attack of the Cybermen, she was up and off again because she had it in every single Saturday night, Sunday morning, Monday, every week for the whole of season 22. And she was very much instrumental in what was to come later on in March, because she was one of the voices that was used as a what's the word I'm looking for, as a reason to take Doctor Who off the air for so long. And she really made a fuss over this period of time. She really did. And when you look back at some of the things she was saying now, you just think, oh, please. Sometimes she was an absolute menace, but when it came to our favourite show, she was the Doctor's greatest enemy for quite a while.
And this is when
John Nathan Teller quite deliberately said he prayed Mary Whitehouse would criticise the programme because it would put a million or two on the viewing figures. He absolutely wanted her approbation. I didn't know he didn't want her approbation. He absolutely wanted her to disapprove of the programme and make that disapproval public. So he, again, JT knew exactly what he was up to.
Except I know why JT said that, and to a degree he was right.
He was joking as well.
Be careful what you wish for, because ultimately, there was a head of steam against the program. I just wonder, the way this series was becoming criticised or questioned in various parts, that to not take on too much. By the way, I was going to say also that the BBC used to chicken away from some things. The producers, the director, the head of drama will have seen these scripts. They'll have seen all the scripts for season 22 and they'll have okayed them. And then when they get some criticism, they hide behind the violence bit. This bit will rest the programme. And yet, actually, they okayed all of this. And it was a scheduling issue. You said it earlier. If this was on later at the night, what would have been the issue at all? None.
Yeah.
And so
I don't know. She used to vote at things that were after the watershed as well. There were certain things because of how the National Viewers Listener Association was set up, and it was very strict then. Sometimes I think actually we could do with the equivalent today, because there's a lot of nudity and F words and all sorts of stuff going on, and all this reality stuff and real life death on the television. Although of course that's not planned. But it's a real case of nobody's watching out there. So from hindsight point of view, I can say yes, it was an inconvenience and they were a menace to a lot of stuff. But I maybe with age or with time and where we are now, I can say, well, actually understand where they were coming from, and I wouldn't necessarily go in the same direction as they did. but I can sort of understand the concerns they may have had when they were watching certain stuff. But as a fan of Doctor Who, well, there we go. It's something different, isn't it? Really, I don't know. It's very. She was of her time. They were of their day.
She wasn't. I'm not defending her. I'm just thinking, if you look at Attack of the Cybermen, and you think of all the controversies, we had the Autons with the police and all the rest of it. We had the deadly assassin with the drowning. Do you think, though, when you really look at Attack of the Cybermen, some of the shots that we've mentioned, was there a gear change?
No, I don't think there was. I think it was just doing what Doctor Who did best. And it was, as Robert Holmes used to love to say, it's to scare the little buggers. And certainly Attack of the Cybermen did. I mean, you know, if it was making myself as a 15-year-old and you as a 16-year-old looking at this going, ooh, hang on a minute, that's a bit different. Oh, that's a bit harsh. And oh, what was it doing to 7 and 8-year-olds that were tuning in at 5:20? And they must have been thinking, oh my goodness. And that actually brings us, I mean, this is obviously Attack of the Cybermen, so let's talk about them. They were coming back now for the first time since the 5 Doctors, but definitely since the first time since Earthshot, where they were brought back with such a bang. Here they are now again. Guys, what did you make of the Cybermen?
I have to say, these are my favourite Cybermen, without a doubt. I hadn't had much experience of previous Cybermen until later on, after this period of Doctor Who, but I think they're great. And what I do like about them particularly are the leads. David Banks particularly is great as the cyber leader. And when actors take the villain part seriously, like Michael Wisher or Alan Benyon or Kevin Lindsay, they really know what they're doing when they're playing Lynx and Slar and Davros. They really go for it. And David Banks really is great as a cyber leader and really steals the show and plays it with real aplomb and real conviction, which is the way it should be played.
You're quite right there, Paul. David Banks is probably the best cyber actor we ever had throughout the entirety of not only classic Who but New Who. But unfortunately, I think Attack Cybermen are amongst the worst for a couple of reasons. Well, I'll mention 3 things. One, some of them look really tatty. When you watch this now, newly cleaned up DVDs, you can see silver gaffer tape and what have you, which surprises me. You know, I'm surprised GNT allowed that to happen, but it happened nonetheless. Then we have the voices. You know, some of the voices used by the Cybermen are just dreadful. You know, they sound like Benny from Crossroads with a cyber mask on. You know, they sound dim-witted at times. Whereas the power in Banks's voice is fantastic. And yet he's compromised by the others surrounding him. The chap there to the left of the Fat Controller is the one talking about in particular. Yeah, he walks as though he's carrying a heavy shopping bag on one side and talks as though, you know, he just won Who's the Biggest Idiot in the Village, in the Cyber Village contest, unfortunately. And then we get to the third point, we have the Cyber Controller. Again, continuity to the max here. But let's not forget, when Michael Kilgareth played the Cyber Controller originally in the 1960s, he didn't act, he acted the physicality of the controller. He didn't do the voice. So we have him playing the controller a la the way he played the controller in the 1960s, very stiff and robotic moves to it, and he does it splendidly. But it doesn't look like the modern day Cybermen and the way it's been decided that they should maneuver and move themselves. Plus his voice just doesn't work for me. You know, he sounds a bit like some high court judge, you know, who's been kidnapped and muffled and objecting to it at the same time. Yeah. He's got a very crust sounding voice, and which just doesn't match the brilliance of what David Banks is doing. Plus, to go back to the physicality of it, 15, 18 years, however many years has passed, and Michael Kilgareth has become slightly corpulent, or as Mum would say, a bit more sturdy, son. You know,
rotund.
He's a bit more sturdy than he used to be, as Mum would have it. And it just doesn't do that character any favours at all. So,
well, do you know what? Yeah.
That I like the Cybermen. I think this is one of their poorer performances.
I think that's a very valid point because, again, it was one of those things where, in my opinion, JNT did too much trying to please the fans, the older fans as well, because we're bringing Michael Kilgareth back. It got a certain age group excited. You know, they were like, "Oh my God, that's great continuity again." I would have recast him, or even have looked at trying to move the Cyber Controller on a little bit more, you know, into something maybe, I don't know, the Alien Queen type thing, you know. Oh, there's me ruining the budget in 2 seconds. But you know what I mean? Something more dangerous, just to have this rather tacky sort of like link to a 1960s episode.
And
Just to get to tie in with it.
I mean,
becomes redundant about 2/3 of the way into the story. He becomes just like a cyber lackey, you know, because with the controller's taking control, and that's a real shame because he has that. He has that on part. He knows what he's doing in that part, and he has to play second fiddle here to the controller.
Yeah, and that's my issue, because they wanted the continuity of the casting. The cyber controller, you would have thought would eclipse David Banks's cyber leader. On some of the casting, you didn't like the kind of asides to the cyber control. I had issues with David Banks's deputy, who kept joining in. I mean, talk about logical thinking. He kept saying, he lies, he's not to be trusted, and he was stating the bleeding obvious. He had a degree in the bleeding obvious. We had the start, didn't we, of some issues with the Cybermen. They were leaking some fluid, this green fluid, and we were going through a period in the 1980s when the Daleks died of, drowning with shaving foam. You had, lots of green fudge appearing everywhere. And here we had some kind of petroleum kind of green oil liquid thing. You also, but they were shot by a bullet. They're metallic and bullets were killing them. That disappointed me. We have the whole controversy about shooting in the TARDIS and how they actually got into the TARDIS before Colin Baker got in. And that always confused me.
Well, he left the door open.
And then, of course, my other question was, if they were based in a sewer, cybertising people and all the rest of it, how were they going to get back to tell us? Because apart from nicking the TARDIS, I wasn't quite sure what the plan was.
Well, I get what you're saying. I've been in many rooms with Doctor Who fans where this very question has come up, and what has been discussed over the years is exactly that. And what it was all about was, the Cybermen in the sewers were left over from the invasion, so they upgraded naturally as they did. They were still in touch with what we now know is Telos, right? This is us getting into real fan stuff here. Everybody, stay tuned, stay with us, don't get bored. And this is what was going on. So they were still in touch with their main base. So they just upgraded themselves and kept in touch, etc., etc. And that's how the plan came about. To get them home, they needed to capture a spaceship. And that's where Lytton comes in, because he suddenly realized that there's active Cybermen under his feet and have been for about a decade. And he's still monitoring all these space channels and, space TV and everything like this. So it's a very interesting thing. But again, it's all packed into this story. And if it's not coming through properly in the story...
None of that, sorry, JT, to interrupt, but none of that is ever made explicit. All we're just told is that the Cybermen in the sewers of London, we don't know how they got there. They don't know why they're there. There's no purpose for them being there other than to be in the sewers.
That's the thing.
And then move
what came out of the sewer section?
What trying to do there was just tying. Look, this is just like the invasion. It's just like Tomb of Cybermen. It's just like 10th Planet. This is a sort of mishmash of greatest cyber hits. It's that's what I call Cybermen. Could well be the alternative title to Attack of the Cybermen.
Oh my goodness! Well, I suppose it could be. Yeah, I mean, it is assuming that you are remembering something from 1960 and 1970s Doctor Who to an extent, isn't it? And your general audience wouldn't have been. I think we did, because we were fans and we'd read up on the then as yet undiscovered Tomb of the Cybermen. We were aware of the story. We were aware of the invasion, and as fans, we can piece those things together. But it didn't seem to put the public off, because they didn't care. They were just watching it for the fact that here's the Doctor, a new Doctor Who with the Cybermen.
Second episode.
Yeah, I think that's very standard, though.
I did like the rogue Cybermen idea.
Oh,
I was excited by and troubled by the beheading of a lot of Cybermen, because again they were less invincible. So I did that to the bullets, and then of course there was the interesting concept, and just with Peter Davison earlier, that had that lovely discussion about what do you enjoy about life, and that little speech, and you had it actually mentioned in the script when they landed in the vault. The TARDIS had just veered off course slightly. And they said, I wonder why the Cybermen are actually concerned about being in the vault to Mary. And you thought, well, they shouldn't be concerned about anything. No emotion.
Very true. But this was the problem, wasn't it, which came in with some of it started with Revenge of the Cybermen, really, when the cyber leader in that is a little bit aware. You know, he's a little bit sort of, you know, exactly the hands on hips aware of the whole title, Revenge of the Cybermen, Revenge of the...
Yeah.
Well, and there's this element that does come through, and we know for a fact it's done for plot. It's done to try and assess the character, because otherwise the Cybermen will come off like they do today as so robotic, and there's no sort of element there of being able to banter or whatever you want to do, or a boring script or something like that. So I sort of get what they were doing, but it does... I think there should have been more. Personally, I think there should have been more in there to explain maybe why these choices have been made. Like a throwaway line from the Doctor would have been, they must have been left over from the invasion or something like, you know, something like that. So we can all go, oh, right, okay. The audience would go, oh, that's how they got there. You know, I don't know. I mean, this was the problem with the 45-minute format. They just didn't know how to fill it. They basically wrote 4 episodes and filled them into 2-parters, didn't they? Boom, boom, boom.
Yeah. It's a shame Colin Baker never got that. You know, I love it when the Doctor has a moment with the leader, you know, those little moments. Davros with Tom Baker, that sort of thing. Peter Davison with the cyber leader. And I wish we had a moment when they had the classic discussion they normally have. They go a bit bigger than the plot. And, you know, I'm a Cyberman. You're an alien who defends humanity. You know, that usual little clash. And we didn't seem to get that, really.
Do you know, I've just realised you've said that. I've just realised that doesn't actually happen. I've never noticed that before.
There's nearly a moment like that in the console room when the Doctor tries to divert the TARDIS to go to Telos, and they all surround him in the console room. And there's a great shot of all, I think it's 5 or 6 Cybermen around him. That's the one. And that would make a great jigsaw puzzle, don't you think, JT?
Oh, I'd love that as a jigsaw puzzle. I'm very surprised that never happened. Yeah. But, you know, there we go, because that would have been great. I always wanted a whole Series 22 set of jigsaws, because some of the images in season 22, still and everything.
You'd have to lose the piece, though. It's got the silver gaffer tape on it, so you don't get to see it.
Oh, yeah. I think that's just so BBC of the time, though. I think that's quite cute when you see sort of things like that. But when it comes to Cybermen as well, I mean, Sam was saying it earlier there, you know, David Banks should have done the voice for all of them, which I understand, but I think I would have liked to have had him change the tones a little bit, mate, because, you know, the cyber leader was such a shock, wasn't he, from Earthshock? And to have him come back for every single cyber story, that was really good of David as well, because he didn't need to. You were also mentioning there, Mark Hardy wasn't in this one. No, because he was doing something else. But he eventually came back, of course, later on. But it is all that element of, you know, that he knew what a Cyberman would be. And he effectively plays the same sort of cyber leader throughout all the times he comes back, from Earthshock onwards to Silver Nemesis. Mm-hmm. And he was the only one that seemed to get the understanding and continuity. Yeah. Do you know what I'm saying here?
Mark Hardy could do a good cyber voice, but unfortunately, the ones in this just there's the guy Brian Orwell, I think, is the actor, and there's another actor in Silver Nemesis who just don't get it. They're basically playing, as I say, either the village idiot, robot of the week. You know, they're not getting the Cybermen now, as you say, in order to make them more dramatic, do have emotion in their voice, and David Banks and Mark Hardy, to a lesser extent, really sell that. These other Cybermen just don't cut the mustard, as far as I'm concerned.
Just after, I mean, you said this follows on from the 5 Doctors. Now, the 5 Doctors, as we have discussed, with the Raston Rory robot, the beauty of that battle scene, unfortunately, was the demise of the Cybermen, killed quite easily, vomiting, losing their head. And then following on from that, we get Attack of the Cybermen, armies of them, and we get beheadings, the green liquid, bullets kill them. And that was, I think, and remember, I'm peak Doctor Who, I'm 16. That was disappointing because I wanted them to be much more invincible. And the Raston Rory robot, as a one-off, did it. Here, guns, bullets, the lot was doing it. And you could even whack him with a, you know, with a kind of metal weapon, and the head comes off. I don't know.
I think there's thing that people miss something with this, and I don't know if anyone watches the Behind the Sofa features on the Blu-ray, but I think one of the team watching that weren't sure about Stratton and Bates because they thought they were human. So I know they don't watch the entire program. I know that, but I'm not naive to think they do. But it's actually interesting because it's Stratton and Bates who knock the heads off, and they are reject Cybermen. So they're as strong as the Cybermen. So they're not human beings. They've got hydraulic arms or whatever they've got. They're partly cybernized, you know. So they are they're stronger than human beings. You know?
I like the cameo with Bates. Was it Bates? Because when they showed his metal hand, metal arm, of course, I thought, oh, there's Chameleon. So it was nice to see that cameo.
I remember seeing that, and again, it goes back to this whole thing of being shown the cyber conversion process, but to be told there's also rejects. Now that's actually quite horrific. The Cybermen are busy converting the galaxy so that they can increase the cyber race, because we all know they were dwindling out, and they're going around converting life forms into Cybermen, and yet there's rejects. And what's not, and it gets still sometimes I'm walking down the street or something, it'll come to me to this very day. How are they defining reject? What are they doing? I mean, it's a bit like Davros throwing out all those mutants that don't work. You know, the column, and he throws them into that tunnel, doesn't he? On Scario, down the toilet. But the Cybermen here are saying, right, you are not like us, and we don't want to know you. And there's an element of snobbery coming here, and they throw them into working as basically slaves. It's very interesting, and yet part of them are all clip,
well,
it's horrible.
By a lot of the cyber actors in this, apart from David Banks, I think they feared that Michael Atwell and the other lad would have dominated and taken over. They had too much charisma. They certainly had too much emotion. They were misfits in that way because they were so angry they didn't fit the cyber process there, did it?
Well, Michael Atwell's character's psychotic, isn't he? He's really psychotic. He's really scary. In fact, I remember seeing an interview with Trent Sticks. Did he not play Bill Sykes, I think, in On the List for BBC classic serials? And that would have been a fantastic performance to see that, because he's really got that real aggression. He's really
totally.
Scary.
Yeah, and it comes out in Attack of the Cybermen, doesn't it? Because, you know, I mean, in a sense, this could be the same character running through, just in different locations, really, and different times. Yeah. And it just shows how good an actor he was, because the Bill Sykes thing, that was one of the best Bill Sykes I've ever seen on television. He was so scary in that you really didn't like. But here he is in Attack of the Cybermen as this very angry, and you can understand why, and you sympathize with him, but you wouldn't trust him. And I would certainly not be following him to the nearest time ship. I thought, you know, Brian Glover's character there was very, very brave, because he suddenly realized, if I don't do this, I'm on my own on this rock in space. What a horrible situation that whole thing is. And these are themes that are suggested but not really seen through, really, to the whole point of Attack of the Cybermen.
It does become a bit, you know, it's almost as if they've lost their plot function. Eric Saward has to dispense with them in whatever way. And that's common in a lot of Saward scripts as they exist. Yeah. Some characters are ciphers or plot devices, and once he's done them, they go. And that's unfortunate, because there was potential there. I mean, rather than having, as I say, and forgive me for saying it again, the Fat Controller stomping around the place as sort of a fan service, you could have had some really good scenes with the Dr. Bates and Stratton. You know, I mean, seeing not only the reject process, but cyber conversion gone wrong and the consequences you could have had in the story. There was real possibilities and avenues to follow there, and we didn't do it. Now, that all sounds as if I hate this show, and I don't. I just think it could have been much better, and had it been better thought through. But it's still, in terms of my view of Doctor, my Doctor Who stories all sit to one of three categories. I love. Very rarely look. I don't hate any Doctor Who. Very rarely look at it again, apart from some more recent stuff. Very rarely look at it again, and all that stuff that sits in the middle, which is just good, solid Doctor Who, which I will always revisit at some point. And Attack of the Cybermen sits in that big category in the middle, and you just know these people are professionals. They knew what they're doing, and all they needed was a little bit more time and a little bit more money, and that would have made all the difference.
I mean, we are talking with all these years of hindsight, and we are all now, because, you know, we were younger then. We saw that. We can now see what was available. You're absolutely right. Had they had time, it still would have been a BBC production in 1985, even with a huge budget. It still would have been done a certain way, wouldn't it? Because it would have met the BBC crowd at the time. But these sort of things is where we can actually look at it now with hindsight and say, this is what we got from it. And I love this about these old stories and how we are reviewing them here on Who's Views Reviews, because we're looking at them now from our ages as we are now. We're remembering what we were at our previous selves. We can see what could have been, but look at this. I mean, it's still magical, isn't it? I mean, we're still engrossed in these things. We get into, and it's Doctor Who.
I have to reinforce that, like I said, at this point, I'm writing a diary. and I'm mentioning the episodes, and I'm mentioning how much I love Colin Baker. I'm mentioning I love all his quotes. When I was scripting with my friend, we were scripting for Colin Baker and Perry, you know, so amazing. And we were scripting, you know, great sayings, literature sayings. We were trying to fit them all in because he'd now set the ball running, hadn't he? He was action man. I thought he was quite Pertwee-esque in some ways. He's jumping around. He's quite physical. He's doing a fair bit of stunts and domination, a bit like Pertwee and Joe, really. And some of his phrases, and I don't know. I know I know his legal background, but the way he delivers the lines and some of the lines he's given, and he's so smart with his English. I love the way he plays with the TARDIS console. When the Cybermen are behind him, look at his little cat-like eyes everywhere. He's very alert and very sharp, and I like that, Doctor. Mm-hmm. And of course, as John was saying, this is our program. We were loving it. We have our critiques because we're judging it, we're remembering it from our age then. We can see what happened to the program and how it fits in. And, you know, sometimes a mishit can actually reverberate later. But it is our program, and Colin Baker was absolutely nailing it.
Oh, yeah. I mean, we were saying... Go on, Paul.
So I was going to say, one of the bits I really liked, going back to what Brendan said about Colin's physicality, is the bit in the garage with the pit, and he jumps down the pit and gives the policeman a kick in and then comes up with a helmet on. That's a fantastic, very funny moment. I love that bit. It's great.
Yeah, but he also does it without a second, because himself and his friend are in trouble, and he's having this guy, you know, he's like, bang, bang, and there's the element of Pertwee in there as well. But it just shows what a talent Colin is and was, and how he thought about the lines he's given, the script he's done, how his Doctor's going to be. He still knows this is still his first series. It's his second story. He knows he's going to be back. You know, he needs to make an impression. He needs it. But I think he just hits the ground running beautifully. The Doctor is there from the moment we see him in the TARDIS corridor, and he's talking to his machine. He's like, right, I'm going to get you this time. And he's full of intent and purpose. And I think that stays with him for the entire series. I'm going to say with the entire series. Absolutely love it. Listen, guys, we're coming to the end of our chat here on about Attack of the Cybermen. So I want to say thank you very much for joining me again. So on the whole, Attack of the Cybermen, final thoughts. Start with John.
Final thoughts. Good, solid Cybermen, good, solid Doctor Who adventure, good, solid Cybermen adventure. If I was delivering one of my teacher reports, must try harder. Because Colin especially deserved better from his script editor at this particular moment. And I think his script editor wasn't perhaps giving Colin the best of it. This was an actor who was investing everything in this, but he knew he'd won the jackpot with this, and he wanted to deliver for the program, for his fans, and for viewers. And it's just history has told us what happened. But as I say, we all love Doctor Who, and this is a good, bankable Doctor Who story, which, despite its faults, I will always return to at some point.
Wonderful. Paul, what do you think? Final thoughts?
Well, I've been praising this all through this. I agree partly with John about some of the Cybermen action later on in part 2, but I love the Cybermen. Airshock Cybermen are my favourites, and I think I agree that Colin is loving this. He's relishing the part. He's enjoying himself. He's really, like you say, JT, hit the ground running. He's really enjoying it, and I think it's a witty script. It's got lots of ideas in it, maybe too many, like Resurrection. Could have had maybe 4 stories out of it rather than just one. But I think it's a great start for season 22. I wish it was Colin's first story. The dialogue's great. And you can see from my description there, I've got, he's allergic to nylon. That's my favourite line in the story. That made me laugh.
No, I'm not. You probably wouldn't be able to say that these days, would you? Because you get some sort of insult or something like that. And Brenda, Time Muddler, final thoughts?
No, I agree that because of the new format, there's a lot they're dealing with, and so they're learning as they go. A bit like Colin Baker said, wait, watch and learn, when it looked as though they were attempting to give the Doctor catchphrases, because he did it a few times. I thought he was the new Bob Monkhouse in space. But if being a bit of a teacher here again, repeat, I would say do more with less. There was so much going on in that story that the fans loved, and we do love, and we go back over it, and we've enjoyed some of the little nuances and details.
We analyse it 40 years later.
Yeah, but I would say if you're really selling it as a drama, just do more with less. Have less in. Make more of the cryons. Make more of the cryogenic process. Make more of some of those aspects rather than give us this whole diaspora.
Yeah. I think if I had the version of a clapometer, maybe I should look into that. I think we're going to give this a sort of medium result, aren't we? It's going to go halfway across the screen, isn't it? Really, it's not going to go full way. It's not going to go all the way. It's going to be like that. It's going to be halfway across there. Yeah, I love it. I think it's fantastic, and I'm quite happy to watch Attack of the Cybermen anytime. And I think it's just fun. I think it's brilliant, and it's a great way.
I know I've had my last say. Can I just say we didn't do it yet?
We have to talk about one of those things. The soundtrack stays with you, doesn't it, guys? I mean, it's still there with us today. But it's a great way to start off season 22 as well, and we're going to be looking at some more episodes of season 22. Tarja Spider has asked us what we're going to be looking at next. Who knows? Stay tuned, as an old friend of mine used to say. Practically because we haven't really decided yet. We'll probably do that after this show. But stay with us. Listen, thank you so much for joining us, guys. Thank you for that. Thank you for watching us. Please like and subscribe if you've enjoyed this. Please leave your comments about what you think of Attack of the Cybermen down in the comments box below. And stay tuned, as I say, because we will be bringing you some more news, Who's Views reviews very soon. And yeah, hopefully we'll get to see you then. So again, guys, thank you again for joining me. Hope you've enjoyed that.
Guys,
it's been a pleasure, guys. Thank you so much. All the best.
And we'll see you again soon. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.